Hello friends, and welcome to this webinar which is organized by Weather Risk Management team. My name is Sanjay Kumar, and I would like to welcome you all in this webinar. Thanks for registering it and making it this evening. So let's start the today's webinar, and if you have question you can ask it either on the chat or directly if possible, right? So I am Sanjay Kumar, and I am a certified risk management professional from Institute of Risk Management London. I have experience of 25 years in the area of actual science, insurance and risk management. Currently, I'm an independent risk management consultant, and I would like to thank Weather Risk for inviting me to have this webinar. And welcome everybody. So what we are going to do today is going to talk about the environmental risk management. As you understand that this is one of the key risks which can remove the existence of the human from the planet. There is no other risk which is as severe as the environmental risk, and this is a great initiative, I would say, that taken by the weather risk team to have such webinar on the different subject. So the way I am going to do, because environmental risk is basically a vast area, and it is not possible to cover every possible thing under the sun. Therefore, what I am going to do today is speak on the fundamentals of the risk management. After that, I will open on what are the environmental key risks, and then we'll see that how does the concepts of risk management can be applied on environmental risks, right? So that's the approach I'm going to take for this webinar. If there are any questions, you can put it possibly in the end. So we shall allow you time for the questions and answer session. So the agenda of the day is that, as I said, briefly, we shall give the tools and techniques on the risk management. We shall talk about emerging risks that we currently facing. What are the applications of risk management to address the environmental risk, and the question answer session. So going to the first topic that I am going to cover is risk management. And under the risk management, I'm just giving you first the brief introduction of risk management. So the first question that it comes is, what is a risk? So I'm just a minute. Yeah, I think it was because of the fan. I'm sorry. What is a risk? So in the risk, you will find there are two things which is important. People define risk in a different way, and sometimes people get confused between risk and the problem, right? So there should be a clear distinction between what the risk is and what the problem is and what the issues are. So these things should be very clear when we are talking about the risk management. So the risk is always futuristic. Risk is not about the past, risk is not about the today. Risk is about the future. And risk should also have some objective. Risk cannot be talked about anything without an objective. Because we talk about the future, therefore, the uncertainty comes into the picture. We do not know. We do not know that what is going to happen the next moment. And that is what the uncertainty is all about. And when we have an uncertainty, it should be on something. Uncertainty has got no meaning unless or until there is a certain objective. Therefore, the future and the objective are the two important ingredients in the definition of the risk. So in a simple way, the risk can be defined as the impediment, so that because the impediment that in future the objective is not achieved. And why the objective is not achieved? Because there is a uncertainty for tomorrow, for the next moment. Therefore, the risk is that due to the uncertainty, you may not be able to achieve the objective. That's what, it defines what the risk is. Now, the question is why to manage the risk? The management of the risk is important because we do not know what the future is in store. It can be good, it can be bad. And therefore, in order to address the question that, what are the potholes, what are the roadblocks are there that we can address? And therefore, the management of risk is important so that we can see what possible could be. So one of the key point in the management of risk is the identification of risk that we shall see later in the slides. Then it comes risk management. Risk management always goes hand in hand with the risk identification. So when there is a risk, there has to be a risk management. There's no point having a risk management, or there's no point having a laundry list of risk without management. Therefore, it is important to manage the risk along with the identification part. So next, what we are going to see is what is the process of the risk management. There are 5 important steps in the risk management process. The first is risk identification. The second is risk measurement. The third is risk management. Fourth is risk monitoring. And fifth is risk reporting. Risk identification is the most important point because it starts from here. I've seen during the working life, when you ask people the question, what is the risk? You get the answer, there is no risk. Then you again ask, what is the risk? Then it comes, I don't think this will happen. So people have a problem in the identification of risk. And unless or until the risks are identified, the next steps will not take place. These steps depend upon the previous step. So the first step is a risk identification. And there are different ways of risk identification. As I told you that asking a what if question, that's a way of, risk identification. Other way is having a workshop. That's another way. If the people cannot be get together, then there's a way of having a survey. You can send the questionnaire. That through you can identify the risk. The other ways are doing a SWOT analysis. So you have to think it around 360 degree around the question that what could be the risk, right? So tomorrow, if the question is tomorrow, so what could be the risk tomorrow? Can it rain? Okay, if it can rain, then what next? So similarly, the what if question need to be asked. The second is risk measurement. There is a possibility that during a workshop session or through a questionnaire, you have identified hundreds of risks. But all the hundreds of risks are not important. So that must be ranked in the order of 1 to 100. The question is how we will address, how would you rank? all the risks from 1 to 100. In order to do that, you have to do a risk measurement. So risk measurement is the next important step in the management of the risk. And once you have measured the risk, then the next question comes is how would you manage it? That's the third step. So in the first step, you will get the laundry list of all the risks. In the second step, by risk measurement, you can rank them from 1 to 100, and then you can address that it is important to address, say, top 10 risks. Then through the risk management process, which we shall see later, you can manage the risk. And then there's a risk monitoring, and risk reporting part comes later on. As we saw in a previous slide, that the first step is risk identification. The second step is risk measurement. And how do you measure the risk? Because we talked about that the risk is about the future and it's an impact on the objective. So we do not know how the future is going to turn out. And therefore, what we use is the probability or the likelihood. And second that we use is what will be the loss. So what is the probability and what is the impact that it will have? And if we multiply the two, what we shall get is the expected loss that we shall, that will occur if that event happens. So if you have got a 1 to 100, all the risks, then in that case, you have to rank all the risks from 1 to 100 using probability and impact. But there are certain risks where it is not possible to quantify. In that case, qualitative judgments are used, right? In those qualitative judgments, we can rank them as a likelihood as low, medium, high. And in the impact, we can rank them low, medium, high, and then put on the quadrant. Another important point in the risk measurement is the risk appetite. So if we have got a list of 100 risks and there are two different people, so both the people will perceive those 100 risks differently because the appetite of absorption of risk is different. Therefore, the first person who is a very rich person will able to absorb some of the risks, whereas somebody who is relatively poor will not be able to absorb it. Therefore, the risk management depend also on what is the risk appetite, how much risk you can absorb. And we have seen, this quadrant where we have identified four blocks. We shall use it in the management of risk. So next we move to risk management. So what we have seen is that we have seen risk identification, we have seen risk management, risk measurement. Now the question is that now we have got the laundry list of 1 to 100 risks. Now what we have to do? We have to, there are four, I call it, the medicines in the risk management area, which is used for the management of risk. And these four areas are: you can avoid the risk, you can accept the risk, you can transfer the risk, and you can manage the risk. In the risk avoidance, what it happens that you're not going to accept the risk, right? For example, if suppose it's going to, if you're living in a place where it rains a lot, right? And you do not have an appetite to basically live in that area, you want to, you do not have any other means to manage that risk. So what you can do is you can move some other place so that you are avoided from that risk. So one option, one medicine, one technique is that you can avoid it. But all these risk management techniques are based on your appetite, the cost of management, right? And the combination of different tools. So it is not necessary that only one technique will be used. Another measure is risk acceptance, right? In that case, that if somebody has got, lots of money, or in certain circumstances, what happens that you don't have a choice. You have to accept the risk. For example, you're living in an area where it rains a lot. You can hardly do anything. You accept that risk. In the previous example, we saw that avoidance, if it is possible and you cannot accept the risk, then you have to run away. That's the risk avoidance. And risk acceptance is you're living with that. So sometimes in the risk acceptance, it may be within your appetite or it may be out of your appetite, but still you have to accept it. The third technique is the risk transfer. And in the environmental risk management, risk transfer is often used a lot in terms of the insurance arrangement or the reinsurance arrangement. It is passed to the third party, right? So, for example, again, the example of rain, if it take place, if we now consider, and in the last few years, we have seen there's a lot of rain in Mumbai, Chennai. There is, there was a flood in Kerala. So you can purchase the reinsurance policy or insurance policy you can purchase so that the losses that has happened is getting insured and reinsurer is going to pay the cost. That's the risk transfer. And the fourth is you have to manage the risk. In this case, you take different steps in the management of the risk. For example, if in a place it rains a lot and in the same place there is a drought. Now the question is we have to address this situation. So what we can do is we can create ponds. When it rains a lot and we can collect the water. And when it is needed during the summer, it can be used. So what we are using is we are managing it out of the given resources. But again, here the cost of risk management is to be taken into the account. So we have got four techniques through which risk can be managed or risk can be mitigated. The next slide, this is an important slide in terms of the management of the risk. The four techniques that we have seen in the previous slide are not a random way of thinking. There is a science behind that through which those techniques are used. And as we saw in the risk measurement exercise, that the measurement is dependent on the probability or the likelihood and the impact. So if we have an x-axis and the y-axis, likelihood and the impact. So in the left below corner, which is shown as the comfort zone, here you will find the likelihood is low and the impact is low. If you move towards the right, you will find that likelihood is high and impact is low. If you move up further, you will find that in the where it is written concern zone, you will find that the impact is high but the likelihood is low. And in the next, you will find that likelihood and impact are both high. So based on what the impact and the likelihood is, you can take different actions. For example, when both the likelihood and impacts are low, of course, you can accept this because it can fall within your appetite and some risk you can take. The second is when your likelihood increases, right? Say, for example, it rains a lot. It rains a lot in particular area. So the likelihood is high, but it may not be possible that the impact is also very high. So it rains, it is raining 365 days, but the impact is minimal or moderate, which you can accept. So in that case, you have to manage your risk. Whatever, there could be different ways of you can manage it. But what happens that if you're living in an area where the likelihood is low, but the impact is high, and the examples that I gave were of Mumbai or the Chennai or or the rain, which has happened recently, when it does not rain too much, but when it rains a lot, and it makes a huge impact. In that case, you can make a transfer. You can purchase reinsurance, or you can purchase insurance, pass the risk to the third party, so that the loss can be minimized. And the fourth is when the likelihood as well as the impact is high, you can avoid it. But at times it may not be possible to avoid the risk. So using this framework of high and likelihood and impact, the tools of risk management can be used. Moving to the next slide now. So this was all about uh, risk management, that what is risk, what are the different steps of the risk management, and how we can manage the risk, how we can use the tools and techniques of likelihood and impact in accepting, avoiding, managing, and transferring the risk. Now let us look some of the key environmental risks that we are facing and how we can use the risk management tool in addressing the environmental risk. I have seen at places where only insurance is considered as a risk mitigation tool, whereas when the risk management tools are used, that uh, it is possible that other tools can be used and the cost towards insurance can be minimized. So let's move to the next slide and look at. So the point that I'm covering, as I said in the beginning, that it is not possible to cover so many environmental issues because there are lots of things, and I have picked up a particular area of the environmental area where I want to demonstrate that what the risk is and how the management can happen. So the area that I have taken is the global warming, change in the environment, which is, and the impact on the sea temperature, etc. Because this is most pertinent in the today's scenario. So if you look at the issues, and what you will see that what is happening, that there is a global warming taking place, right? And it has been said that global warming is taking place because of the greenhouse gases, right? Because we human, because of the industrialization and having the modern lifestyles, we are um, we are giving back too much of carbon into the atmosphere, and as a result of that, uh, global warming is taking place. So this is a graph of last 20 years from 1990 to 2010. Uh, the growth of the greenhouse gas emission, and you will notice that between the 20 years there is a almost 42% increase in the carbon dioxide. You will further notice that in this graph, that from year 2000 to year 2010, there is a substantial increase in the emission of carbon dioxide. So this will give an idea that how does our gas emissions is taking place in our atmosphere. And we shall see in the later slide that what are the impact of these gas emissions. The next question that I would like to show is the global warming that is taking place. This data is of last almost 140 years, from 1880 to almost 2020, I think it is projected. You will find that in last 140 years, there is almost 1 degree increase in the average global temperature. Through this graph, you will notice certain phenomena during the last 50 years. And you will notice that there's a sharp rise in a temperature between the First and Second World War. So if you look at around 1920 to around 1940, you will see that there's a sharp rise. And after that, there is a fall in the temperature. And after around 1970s, then there is a sharp rise in the global temperature. So this indicates the phenomena through which our planet has gone through, and what have been the incidences. It has got linkages with what the human activity has done, right? And we shall see in the subsequent slide as well that how this is linked to changes in the sea temperature. If we go to the next slide, and we shall find that this is about rise in a sea temperature that has taken place over again the same period of time, right? Uh, and you will find a similar phenomena what you saw in average global temperature, that between the First and Second World War, right? Somewhere here to here you will find a sharp increase, right? And then there is a fall as we saw there, and then again there is a rise, right? And it is estimated that the average increase of the ocean surface temperature is 0.85 degree, which is, I would say, very close to 1 degree, which is depicted in the previous slide as well. So the next graph that we see is that rise in the sea level, because when the global temperature is rising, the sea temperature is rising, there is a melting of glaciers, and as a result of that, there is a rise in a sea level. And this graph shows a cumulative rise in a sea level, right? And this is, of course, leading to the risk of lives who are living in low-lying areas, and there is a risk of some of the countries who are surrounded by sea may get submerged sometimes in future if no actions are taken place now. So we can see a clear trend in the different variables of the Earth, which is showing in the data. This is an important slide in terms of the outcome, and this slide is showing the comparison between the carbon dioxide and uh, pH value of the seawater. So in the left hand side, it is showing about, I think, three. One is a Bermuda, another is a Hawaii. So it is for 20 years time. And in the left hand side, it is showing the increase in the carbon dioxide over the 20 years period. And in the next slide, which is showing the falling graph, right, you will see that there is a constant fall in all the three areas. So the one falling which is showing is that the pH value of the seawater is decreasing. And when the pH value of the water decreases, it means it gets more acidic. So what has happened that as a result of the global warming and the greenhouses effect, the seawater is getting acidic in nature. So this has got a very severe impact on the uh, sea surface, and as we shall see in the next slide, that what is the impact of this acidity. And here comes the building block, the coral reef. So coral reef is basically a large underwater structure, right? And this is considered to have occupied less than 0.2% of the seabed. But still, they run through around 150,000 kilometers of the coastline around 100 countries. What is the utility of the coral reef? The utility of coral reef is that they provide habitat and shelter for many marine organisms. So they depend on the coral reef. So if the coral reef get affected, their life will get affected. So it is a source of nitrogen and other essential nutrients to the marine food, right? They absorb wave energy and contribute to environmental protection through the reduction of coastal erosion. They reduce the damage in case of a storm, hurricane, and in some ways the energy of tsunami. So these are the roles played by the coral reef, which is sitting in the bed of the ocean. And on these coral reef, lots of aquatic animals and plants are dependent. So if something happens to these coral reef, the sea will get affected. And if sea get affected, the entire environment is going to get affected. So moving to the next slide, what we see that what is the impact of this damage? What happens if uh, if the temperature rises? So the coral reef get damaged and they lose their life if there is an increase in acidity in the water and the temperature rise, so they die. The other reason of reduction in coral reef is overfishing, pollution, and the different activities that is taking place in the sea. It is estimated that by around 2050, 90% of the coral reef may get wiped out. And it is said that over the last 30 years, half of the coral reef has been lost. Now, this is a very, very serious situation because if they are get affected, the entire ecosystem is going to get damaged. If they are not there, the animals living in the sea, they will get affected. Because of the rise in the temperature of the sea and the acidity in the water, the weather is going to get affected. So there will be a great mismatch, imbalance in the atmosphere that is going to happen if the coral reefs are not protected. The question now is that it takes a lot of time for the coral reef to grow. It is not easy for them and it may take hundreds of years. So the way they grow is that it is estimated again that 0.8 millimeter to 80 millimeter they grow per year. That's the rate which they grow, and we can think of that what will be the impact if they get destroyed. And as estimated, stated above, that 90% of the coral reef may get impacted by 2050. This is a grim situation, right? So we have seen that how does the greenhouse gases are increasing? How does the sea level is increasing? How does the acidity in the sea is increasing? What is the impact of that on the coral reef? And how does this is going to impact our environment? So moving to the next slide. So what is happening is that the change in the climate. And so the change in the climate has got a sequence of events that we have just seen, which is responsible for that. What is happening that there is extreme weather, extreme cold condition, excessive rain, flood. It has been estimated that by 2021, by the end of the century, the South Asia may be too hot to survive. Global warming, it is, as I said, it is reduction in snow and the rise in the sea level, increase in acidic nature, these are all happening. There's a study done by Munich Re, which is one of the reinsurance companies, and IMF. They have indicated that there is a direct link in the global warming and the El Nino effect that impacts the monsoon in India. The IMF study indicated that 1 degree centigrade increase in the temperature in India, the per capita income expected to fall by 1.33%. So definitely there is an impact on the economy because it's going to affect the rain. So there is a complete cycle of that we have seen in terms of the global warming. Now, coming back to the question of the risk management and the linkages. So the first part, we have seen that what is the risk management, right? What are the tools and techniques? We have seen that what the environmental risk from the greenhouse gases. Now we have to integrate the two. So we say that what is the risk? And as I said in the beginning, that risk is not without any objective, without any context. when I ask a question, what is the risk? The risk for whom? Who is affected? If there is nobody, then there is no risk, right? So it has to be in context. Somebody should be affected. So who are those people, those who are going to get affected? So it will be the individuals, people like me and you, people, corporate, they are going to get affected. It's the state, the country, the region, and the planet. So everybody is going to get affected, but the objective of each are different. Of course, the fundamental objective of all is same, is survival. But the objective is not just a survival, it's more than that. But as far as if I just try to map it through that what are the objectives of each, then for the because I'm talking in terms of the extreme situation. So for the individual, the extreme situation is the survival. That is the most important thing. For the corporate, yes, survival is important. Another is a profit because they have to make profit. For the state, so the state is to look after the survival of the people, but also their objective is the welfare. So their objective increases. When it comes to the country, so they not only have to have a look at the survival, they have to look at the welfare. And also they have to look at the control because their domain increases further. And if you go further down the region, in terms of region, if it is Southeast Asia, you have to find that you have to influence other countries as well. So as the domain of the land increases, we see that the objective increases. And when we are talking of the planet, it's all of the above objectives. Why I'm telling objective? Because when we shall look at the risk mitigation, we have to look at the objectives. And based on the objectives, the risk mitigation tool that individual will adopt or the corporate will adopt will be different. So it is important to have a mapping that what is getting affected. Let's look at the next slide, that how this is getting affected. Now I'm taking an example of a cyclone or a storm, and you can consider it. This is an example of the air, and storm is part of an air, and air is important for our survival, right? So the question is that here we are taking the example of storm, and I'm considering it's a very severe storm. The situation is that where the severe storm comes, and on the right hand side, what I have done is I've listed different stakeholders and their objectives, and we shall see that for each of the stakeholders, they will pick up the different risk mitigation tool. They will not pick up the same mitigation tool. Because generally it is considered that it's only the risk transfer is one of the ways of the risk management. But that's what I want to show here. That it's not just the risk transfer, but there are other tools as well. So if I consider the example of individual, and survival is important. So let's consider an area where the storm comes quite regularly, and people are there. And the question is of survival. What action you will take? What action individuals will take when the question of survival comes, and the choice is given? One of the options that one can do is to go away from that place, if it is feasible. If it is feasible, then it is possible that person can move away from that place and avoid that risk. So this is the example of an avoidance, though it is an expensive, right? Though feasibility is to be seen, but this is one of the options. What I am saying is that it has to be seen in the feasibility context also, right? So staying with the individual, right? So one option is you can move away from the place, avoiding it. The other is that if you have money and if it is possible that you can survive, in that case, you can purchase an insurance. You can purchase an insurance where you can transfer your risk of the storm, of the losses that you may get to the insurance company, and thereby mitigating the risk. Now the question comes, can you manage the risk? What I am trying to say is that in a situation where the lots of storm comes, and can you manage it? Is it possible for individual to manage it? In my assessment, it is not. It is not possible that individual will manage in a situation where the storm comes very regularly. And similarly, it is not possible for the individual to accept. So if the person is going to accept this risk, then someday he may die, right? Therefore, in this particular case, I have written I for individual in the above two boxes. So these are the two options that individual may have in managing the risk against the storm or a cyclone. Now, next question comes about the corporate. And as we have seen that for the corporate, survival is important, but the profit is also important. The question is that can corporate avoid the risk? My assessment is no, the corporate cannot avoid the risk, because if corporate avoid the risk, their objective will not be served. Their objective is survival as well as profit. So if they move away, the profit will not come. Therefore, the first option of avoidance does not, apply for the corporate, and therefore I have not written C1 under the avoid category. However, what corporate can do is that they can purchase insurance. So they can transfer the risk, very much possible, and they do it, right? Corporate also has got lots of capital with their sources. And even if the storm comes, they have to manage their business. They have to manage, if it is a manufacturing company, then in that case, they have to depend on other smaller companies, and then they have to find out how to manage that. So in order to have a profit under the corporate bracket, they have to manage the risk as well, right? But they cannot accept the risk, because if they accept the risk, then there's the risk of that you may totally lose all your profits. Therefore, what corporate can do is they can either transfer the risk or they can manage the risk. So we have seen in the two examples that the same, the four boxes are there, and there are different options available for the different individuals. Next, look at the state. Of course, again for the state, it is not possible, because state is to do a welfare activity also. State cannot run away. Therefore, state cannot avoid. For the state can transfer, because state has got resources. And as we have seen in terms of our government, they purchase or they encourage different insurance schemes, like for the agriculture, and they also have schemes for different states for cyclone and other things. So definitely state can use the resources to transfer the risk. State also has got resources to manage the risk, because they can manage it, right? Again, state is not as big as the country, and I don't think that state will accept. Again, acceptance of risk, that there's going to be a bigger loss, which in my opinion, state cannot go into the acceptance mode. But when it comes to the higher degrees, for example, in terms of a country, in the country you have to do a control exercise also. So in the country, if it is a country and in the country, so in that case, I'm not putting in the avoid category. Again, transfer is there and they can manage it. But when it comes to the region and the planet, they have to accept the risk, because in the acceptance of the risk, first, in the entire planet, all the activities will not happen together. So what will happen is that in some area the storm will come, and in the another area the storm will not come. So they have an option of accepting the risk, and by doing that they have to address it. So also as we move on a higher spectrum, their risk appetite also increases, and because of the increase in the risk appetite, they have a wider choice of the risk management tool compared to the lesser sourced individuals. So as we can see that there are different options available for the management of risk under the same risk of the cyclone. Now, let's move to the another example. Here, I'm just going to introduce you briefly to the operational risk so that I can apply this technique to to an example um, to the risk that we just discussed. The operational risk is defined as it is the loss arising due to failure of people, process, and system, or the external event. When these activity happens, right, then what happens that there is a loss event, and as a result of that, there is a losses happens. So the primary building block of the operational risk is the cause that results into the event, and the event results into a losses. So this is the model. This is the model that start from here. What is the cause of the event? So in the operational risk, cause is either there is a factor of people. People are not adequate. They are not adequately trained. The processes are not good. Because of that, the loss or the events are happening. The system is faulty, or there is an external event. So if this is applied on a company, right, what happens that it triggers the event. For example, people not properly trained. What will happen is the process will not happen properly, and as a result of that, there will be a loss. So this is used in the operational risk management, and I'm trying to use the same technique in the management of um, greenhouse gases. See in the next slide. So risk management in the greenhouse gases. So you will see that it's the same thing. It's a cause here, and the cause is leading to the event, and event is leading to the consequence. So what is the cause here? If I'll ask the question that the risk is from the greenhouse gases, what is the cause? The cause is that greenhouse gases, gas production, that is coming it out. And as we have seen over 100 years, that there is a definitely increase in the carbon emission. And from where it is coming? It is coming from the industrialization. I'm just putting it in a one bracket. It is not just the industrialization, it can be many other reasons. But I'm just bucketizing it as, putting everything under that. So it is happening because of the industrialization. And why it is happening because of the industrialization? Because our processes may not be good enough. As we have seen that in the manufacturing of cars, I remember there used to be Bharat 1 stage, Bharat 2 stage, Bharat 3 stage. These are the different emission norms because the processes are getting improved. So there is a possibility that when the processes are improved, the emission rate reduces. And another factor is that if it is, the people are also responsible for the increase in the greenhouse gases. So these are the causes. What we are saying is that these are the causes of the greenhouse gases, right? And as a result of that, what is the event? The event is that there's a rise in the temperature. And as a result of that, what is the outcome? All kind of damages that we have talked about, the coral reef and all. So this is an output. This is an output. We cannot do anything to the output. We have to accept this. We don't have a choice, right? So the only choice that we have is, even we don't have a choice here in terms of the event, the only choice that we have is at a cause stage, right? So we can control the cause, and that's what I was talking about. And in the previous slide, if I missed, I think to control these causes, these problems, right? That you can have a preventive control and you can have a detective control. So if you can apply controls on people and process, you can address your risk. Right? Preventive control is something which is to be applied in advance, and in a detective control, it is done post-advance. For example, in our example of the coral reef, right? Preventive control will be taking the action now, in advance, or maybe we would have taken the preventive action 50 years back. So even if today is not late, we take action today as a preventive action. What is detective? Detective, detective is we know that the damage has happened, but we can easily work on that to reduce the overall damage and learn from it. That's a detective control. So that's what these are the two things that we can do. So what we can do here, we can improve our processes, we can train our manpower, right? And so what will happen is that if we are applying these controls here, right, so it will prevent the coral reef getting damaged. So the same technique will be applied here. And in this case, as we said, in case of a detective control, what will happen is that the damage has happened, but the action will be taken. So in this exercise, what we see that there is a control mechanism, and in the risk management, the control mechanism is very, very important. And as we always said that if we are going in a car, you can avoid an accident only by applying a brake. That's what the control you have. So in a risk management, it's not just the risk mitigation tool that is important. The control is also very important, which you can apply. And this is applied on the causes, right? So identification of cause is very important in the management of the risk, right? So these are two examples that I wanted to share with you on the application of risk management. And I would like to summarize this seminar by saying that risk management is a systematic study of identifying the risks in advance and take preemptive action to enable achieving objectives. IMMR that we call, that risk management process, right, is a strong tool, and that is perhaps the only tool in the management of risk. Risk management of acceptance, avoidance, transfer, and management is dependent on the likelihood and the impact. So there is a science behind that application of this thing. Global warming is a central to the key risks that may threaten the mankind in the future. Risk management tool can be applied in managing the environmental risk, and operational risk tool, as just discussed, can be used in the management of systematic controls in managing of the environmental risk. So that's what this is my contact number. You can, if you have a question, we can just go through the question answer round. This is my email number, you can write. This is my WhatsApp, LinkedIn number I have given, LinkedIn, right? So that's what from my side in terms of the webinar. I'm ready to for the questions what you have. Do we have any questions? One question is coming from Steve. There was a lot of talk around global risk, but it is not clear on practical level how to drive local risk. I think, Steve, I agree with you. In fact, I would say other way around, because being a tell me. Yeah, let me first answer the question of Steve. Uh, I think what I've seen, Steve, is that in terms of I've seen a reverse case, because when the corporate sectors and they are doing they are doing at a individual level. And what I have always advocated, that the global picture should be brought into the practice, right? But to answer your question of how to bring the global risk back into, so for that, what is important is that the local government is to come into the picture. And only then, because as we said in this, that there are different stakeholders, like either the individuals or the corporate or the country or the state, right? So they all have some have a limited role, some have a wider role. So if we are coming from the global level, then we have to go from global level to the country level and then go down. So we have to take that hierarchical route. Only then it is possible to take the global risk. Priyanka is asking, sir, I have one question, whether insurance is the only method to mitigate risk. I think that's the only, no, Priyanka, I think that's the message I wanted to give through this webinar, that insurance is not the only method of mitigation of risk. As I said, that there are 4 ways of mitigation of risk. You can avoid the risk, you can accept the risk, you can manage the risk, and you can transfer the risk. And insurance is only a transfer part of the risk, right? And as I also said, that depend upon what is the likelihood and what is the impact. If it rains, the entire year, and it rains mildly, you will not purchase insurance. So insurance